keep relevant to what you're going through. Having said that, the dream question, because that's like, it's something we don't probably do enough with our, busyness of dealing with everyday life. So the starting point of this big, 2000-year question is that I'm working a lot with startups. Their horizon is 3 to 5 years. And I was thinking to myself, okay, how do we become a bit rebellious in this day and age with change, so social change? And the thing that came to me is that really the fashionable thing is dystopia. Like, it's really easy to be negative and dystopian, but if you look at facts, there hasn't been a time where we've had such humongous opportunities for humanity. Like on paper, we're doing well. On mind and fear and on media, we are afraid of everything and the world is going to shit. Pardon my English. But if you look at Hans Rosling, for example, who's just passed away recently, an extraordinary scientist who used to go on TV shows and start talking about how do we actually measure where we are objectively and not sort of fearmonger like social media is so good at doing with their algorithms that basically create an echo chamber, as you know so well. How do we get away from that is by starting from facts. And factually, we are now at a point where more people die from suicide than any other danger. So we are the biggest danger to ourselves. Now, that is a significant thing because we are coming to a point in evolution where we have an opportunity to really take the next step or destroy the planet, up to us. But it's not going to happen, I don't believe, through technology. We have the technology already. If you go out to engineering, I'm working with loads of startups, edtech, health tech, fintech, they have the tools. The biggest problem to get those tools to create sustainability, world level change, or what Anton Schubert, who you might have met, is talking about planet-centric design, is literally the human-to-human interactions. We are the biggest barrier to it, not the technology or the money. Now, once we know that, how are we going to fix it? That's our job. As human scientists, that's where we are in the forefront of that change. And I've always been at the forefront of that change in innovation projects because we are the first to go out on an innovation project to understand what is the problem to solve. Human scientists are the first in line. Then you get the engineers, the designers, and the business factor people. So, like, in a way, we are pioneers, and that means that we owe it to ourselves and to humanity to think big, to think far, to think more than 3-5 year horizons, like a lot of people. And that's why I asked you to think what would be a great way to use the periodic table. It's just an excuse for you to think in the future. We could just say, how do we evolve our communication practices in 5 years, 50 years, and 2,000 years? What's interesting about 2,000 years is that it's really hard to imagine because we have to let go of dystopian view that we're about to create a damaged planet, because we can permission ourselves to dream that in 2,000 years we'll be harmonious with the planet. And that means that we can stop that fear-based thinking, which has been always in history, by the way. There hasn't been a time in history when we haven't been afraid that we're about to kill the planet or ourselves. Literally, you look back. Every single century, there has been that same echo. So maybe it's time for us to think in a more optimistic way, which is why I created this really saturated in color brand, which some of you might be going like, why are you talking about space? Why do you have space on? If you've watched my website, you'll see that there's a lot of space. It's not Star Trek that I'm referencing, it's the inner world. The metaphor, we came up with the team, how to brand this idea of inner and outer world. Human to human is like what we think of communication. So you talking to other people. But the human to self is the hidden unlocking, which is symbolized by space. So every time you see me using space metaphor, it's kind of an invitation for you to go within and think about the voice in your head, how you think, your mental models, and how you communicate to yourself, which is actually really a massive part of how you communicate with others. Before we start talking about empathy, talking about conflict mediation, diplomatic resolutions, anything on the outside, well, it all starts from how you talk in your head, which is why the periodic table has 2 parts. The whole bottom bit, the white, is human to self. In other words, the mental models that distort or filter what's going on in communication through your head. And all of that is what people think of as communication, which is what you say, what you do, how you intend to communicate, but it's all governed by that bottom layer, which is why it is so important to think of personal growth when we think of, like, leadership today doesn't exist in an evolutive way without having personal growth at the forefront of every single leadership topic. And that's becoming a huge thing. If you look at MIT's work, you'll find a lot of that. So this is basically the very complex mental model collection of 130 elements, which you can't read because it's too small on the screen. But I'm going to go through, I'm going to pick a few of these elements. So I'm going to share 16 different bubbles, which are like work bubbles that I've been in, that I know for a fact would need people like you. Some of them are growing, some of them are already established. And I'm not saying that they're the only bubbles where you would want to communicate, but those are definitely ones I've been in, and I can tell you for a fact how it's going on. And each of those bubbles, I'm going to show you what I got from it in terms of this period, because this periodic table wasn't built overnight. It's basically just a synthesis. It's like doing a literature review and you just put it all together in one page. This is me doing field work for 25 years on this topic and gathering them in one place. So I'm going to stop the overwhelming big picture and go straight into some of those bubbles. And what I invite you to do during this little first section of the lecture is to note down two things. First of all, any elements with the numbered reference, like this is the element periodic table, which is the one I've just showed you, and it's 1104. I've got a numbering system, which if you're into maths and you like those kind of things, I can explain later, but write down the number of any elements that you're particularly curious or you have questions on. It's quicker than writing down what the element picture or name is. Second thing is I invite you to think of ahead of the assignment you're going to get after this lecture, which will be to submit a harvest with a form of one element illustrated in pop culture, like, for example, Netflix, for example, YouTube. The easiest is to go onto YouTube websites. You can just type YouTube free clips, copyright free Creative Commons clips, which basically are going to be things like, you know, Suits or Game of Thrones or whatever. And they have clips and quotes of lots and lots of different small parts. And your job is going to be to submit one harvest to illustrate any element of the periodic table that you choose. Now, to make it easier for you, I'll give you some tips at the end of how to do that, because it's quite a vast, difficult thing to do. But that's going to be, so that's why I'm inviting you to make notes about elements, to think ahead about how you might be doing your assignment afterwards. Have I forgotten anything, Rebekah?
I don't think so. No, because they know that they can always refer to Moodle. Cool. And there is all the information.
All right, so I'm just going to stop hiding and I'm going to go here. I can just go in and out from this. So if there's any problem with visibility, Rebekah, I'll trust that you'll interrupt me.
Okay.
And in terms of the pixelating as well, if you need me, I can do a screen share so that it's better. But at the moment, I'm assuming that this virtual cam is working fine.
Now it's perfect.
So as you can see on the left here, there are 8 different color-coded categories to the periodic table, which are called lenses. You find them at the bottom here. Those are basically fields. Each one of them could be an academic journal. In fact, some of them are. So it's a massive amount. I mean, literally every element could have books written about each one of them. But some of them you'll recognize: ego, attitude, flow from Mihaly's positive psychology, empathy and alignment is a very hot topic, but some of them are less visible, like needs and conflicts, or dynamics and influence. Those are meta topics. And so to help you navigate the brain of this complex thing, I'm going to every time show you where we are in the lenses here. Okay. So this first one, we're going to talk about flow, which is one of the most known elements. And this is actually one of my first jobs in Finland. You a bit younger here, a bit more candid I was. This is me running a workshop in a small creative agency. And this is the day that I got unwillingly promoted to HR manager. There was a workshop and we had, it was transforming the company culture. So I was there initially I was hired as a human factors engineer, which nobody understood what it means. Essentially, I was trying to get like insights to help their creative projects. So upfront from the engineers. But very quickly, I realized that their problem was not their creative, it wasn't their creativity. It was their way of working together. They were just very dysfunctional. So what I did is I started looking from like the process level. How do we fix the culture? How do we make the culture more conducive for them to do great work, great teamwork? So I did this workshop, and I went round, and there was this one room where there was people trying to figure out with their flip charts, like, what do we need to do to become a better team and everything. And the whole workshop ended up on this wall with a series of like ideas of change. I did a pattern analysis, and the main takeaway was that they had an assumption that flow is only possible for certain people at certain times. If they're musicians, when they play the guitar, if they're gamers, when they're gaming, if they're coders, when they're coding. But when you're working together, can't have flow. Because I'm introvert, because I'm Finnish, because I'm shy, because there's all sorts of excuses started to come up. And I go like, is that really the case? Do you actually have to be like having a difficult grinding time when you're working with people and only be okay with your headphones on alone? Is that actually an assumption that holds true when you start looking at science? So I did my, I went back to my drawing board, my university notes, and I started to do a literature review on all that I understood about positive psychology and flow. So this is me doing a quick timeline analysis of all the measuring mental models that were at the time available to me on how to measure flow. I picked the quadrant model from the 80s, and then I enriched it with the octant model. And then I came up with a very simple self-evaluation for the company to work with, which looked something like this, which was like four different metrics, even though flow is way more complex. I was looking at what's their perceived feeling, their perceived challenge, their perceived competence, and their level of motivation. I'm plotted on a chart with a very simple questionnaire. If you're quick, you can scan it and try it for yourself. Here, you can do a self-evaluation of flow. This is what I did for the HR. And by the end of that workshop, the CEO came to me and said, like, hey, do you know, we don't have an HR at the moment. Would you be up for doing that? Like, could you do something, like just put a band together? As like, I didn't know what I was getting into, and it's like, okay, I wanted to help. Started doing 70-hour weeks, which was ridiculous. But it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning. And so instead of having to do the full-time HR, I was doing two jobs, HR and doing my normal anthropology human factors job on the side. So I had to find automation to help human resources. So I used this kind of thought, science, measuring, tools, QR codes, and then I created them a marketplace. I basically redesigned their role structure based on flow. So rather than making it, I'm senior, I'm junior, I get paid a lot because I'm competent, I actually made them responsible for flow. And that was a huge success, because then they don't go to their boss going like, oh, I'm miserable, help me feel better. They go like, I need this. I need competence, I need training, I need tools. So they become autonomous, and it's the basis of, HR is to create autonomized teams that don't need babysitting by a manager. So that was like key learning from this. HR needs human science. I'm surprised at the number of people in HR who have no idea about flow. The basic theories of positive psychology from the 50s, 60s, and 70s are literally unknown and unused by HR managers who are over-focused on personality modeling, over-focused on measuring people's feelings, which is not an index of real flow, because you can have a great feeling and be interfering in other people's flows. I can show you later. So they're really not very scientific, and they need human scientists to, like, if some of you want to work as sort of looking at people, HR managers need you. There's the first bubble. Second, so the thing I've got obviously from this periodic table is the measuring flow element, which is one of the mental models that's foundational. Second one is about Lego. How many of you actually played Lego as kids? I'm pretty sure some of you did. I did. I was a huge Lego fan, and I thought, when Lego Play came out in the business consulting world, I was super excited about how can I use Lego to do things in consulting. I used to work in France as a consultant with very stiff corporate blue shirt people who were like, you come in and you have to put on a facade. So I started to play with Lego to do consulting work. So I was doing business consulting where I would take a cardboard, quickly mock up of a board game with stakeholder maps. I would get them to start, I would go and interview stakeholders. So one example project that was really, really fun to do was pharmaceuticals. So I was in France working with these pharmaceutical innovators and these pharmaco managers who were with, suit and very stiff and very serious and taking themselves very seriously. And they're full of compliance. That industry of medical is literally locked down because of innovation, because of all the compliance barriers. So they're very uninnovative people usually, and very, very cynical. very difficult to work with as innovators. And so I started playing around with Lego. I said, okay, let's start this interview. You're probably expecting me to take notes and record everything. I'm not. I'm just going to take these Lego figurines, and you're going to choose one that symbolizes you and your team around. And they looked at me a bit weird, and I just go like, just humor me. And then they got into it. They really loved it. And then, you know, I was able to map where they are on the maturity of organizational maturity, because most people think that an organization is just a machine, which is an old paradigm. If you're interested in organizational design and the idea of how to hack an organizational growth, like a startup, there's a thing called a teal organization, which is when you think of an organization not as a machine with a dashboard, like a lot of American corporations, or like the old mafia hierarchical driven companies, very, very sort of pyramidal, or institutional lockdown with matrix, or even the Finnish style family type of organization where everybody's flat and equal hierarchy. There is a new breed coming called teals. There's a huge literature field on that. Corporate Rebels is writing about that in the Netherlands. Frédéric Laloux has written a huge amount on this. It's a whole field of work called teal, as in T-E-A-L, the color teal organizations, who in a nutshell have built in the attitude towards change that is looking at the world in a very different way. They see the organization as a living organism that's complex and not complicated like a machine. Complexity versus complicated is a huge difference. Complexity is like a bowl of spaghetti, that when you move one spaghetti, they all move. Complicated is like an airplane. You take a bolt out, you can predict what's going to happen. So human systems are complex, not complicated. And therefore, a teal organization builds that complexity into itself. And so the world is literally blossoming with teals. Good example of a teal. Anybody know a teal organization that's been in the press recently? Trick question. Patagonia is a great example. They're probably one of the most famous. Patagonia is a teal. So there's a lot of teal organizations who are literally clueless of how to work, and they need human science to actually change their culture, because there's some fundamentals that they just don't understand in terms of the human brain, which is too complicated. So too complex, actually. So one thing that I took from this bubble is the importance of what we call attitude to change built into the DNA of a company. So it's not enough to just like do your to-do lists. The attitude to change here is about balancing personal growth with doing things on the outside and building that into the actual company culture. There's a whole field of work needing human scientists to do that. So that was the second bubble. Third one. If you've watched anything from my YouTube channel and the playlist that I put at the bottom, I was just going to see if somebody had actually clicked on it out of curiosity. You'll recognize this picture. This is Naresh. I talked about him in the TEDx I did in Turku a few years ago, where he's a Kone guy. He was one of the star sales reps in Kone. And I did a lot of work with sales. So obviously, when you start looking at communication, the first thing that people want to buy from you is how to make money. And in particular, how to sell. So like I've done years and years of work with marketing and sales, because they're the ones who come with the money bags that tell me, okay, you're a scientist, tell me how to sell better. So this is me trailing, doing anthropology actually with a number of people from Kone in different parts of the world. India, Paris, New York, a lot of fun, very stressful. This was before the smartphones. So I was literally on the ground with an audio recorder, and this is me in the monsoon, sitting in the car, watching Naresh on his first morning coffee. What he's got here is a little SIM card phone that is a second phone. And he has two phones. He has the normal phone, and he has the second phone that you see here, which is his key accounts, about 400 people that here is privileged customers. And every morning he sends the Pearl of the Day SMS, which is something a little bit corny that is in his culture absolutely loved. You know, like, for example, if you want to see how rich you are, don't count your money, just drop a tear from your eyes and see how many hands come to hold it. Now he's sending this out to, 400 architects, building managers, construction engineers, these kind of people in India, and they're loving it. Like, he sends this out and then he waits, and then the next 20 minutes he's picking up calls from these people going like, oh, Naresh, this is really great. I love this part of the day. Could you, I'm sorry, I can't get an elevator from your Kone I have to use Mitsubishi. My client's being an ass. Sorry, but please keep me on the list. What's he doing? He's doing relationship sales. And when you look at relationship sales, all the sort of wisdom that people have in marketing was just destroyed. The thing they needed is empathy and relevant tools to answer their needs in an empathic way. So all the sales brochures were useless. The only thing that was useful is the Little 100 Stories of Connie, which is a book empathizing with their fear that an elevator is going to crash and go wrong. And it's 100 stories of how they solved it. That was the only book they used. Every brochure, 8,000 brochures were just put in the bin because they were too just feature oriented. So learning from that is that to cultivate relationship, you have to take a journey of empathy, which is the color green in our system of color coding, where you have to work through the first meeting and build relationship. And sales can be done through relationship sales and trust building. And that relationship sales leads to much better quality interactions for B2B sales in particular. You'll find that that's very needing help of human scientists in customer service, airport traffic management, COVID crisis, hospitality, catering. And there, I invite you to look into the model that we put called the green, blue, red, which is one I've done a lot more videos on than others. For example, the TEDx I did was about the green, blue, red. And, you know, literally when you take just that one mental model, you can make a whole career just helping and training people in sales. So there's another bubble that really needs human scientists at the moment. Rhythm-wise, Rebekah, am I going too fast, too slow? Is this good?
I think you're fine. Yeah, it's really engaging. So keep going.
Cool. So when we talk about UX design and design, people all like have this vague idea of what UX and UI and CX design is. In fact, I was trained as a designer and I worked with IDEO, design thinking agency. So I've been in the design bubble for a long time. And I get really frustrated when people think of design as basically just interface design. It's true that it's there, or even more frustrating when people talk about design as being furniture. I think we've cracked the problem of sitting on chairs. I think we've got bigger problems to solve than making chairs and new tables and fancy lights. I think design has a huge mission around what we call ritual design. This is a little doodle that we did in a startup hub called Maria 01 in Helsinki, where we have lots of startups working with educational technology and who are literally trying to evolve the way we teach through technology. And they came to me and said, like, look, could you do us an introduction to ritual design? And I just put together this with our team. This is a slide. This is our artists. These are my two stepdaughters, my partner Anu, and we were like basically drawing this live. And then at the end, we ritual designed something for them. So each one of them walked away with a mini ritual for their own daily life. And you know, we created a heuristic about like a checklist of design. You probably recognize the flow octant model in the middle. And then, you know, what is a ritual is really the difference between service design and ritual design is that you design the meaning on top. So in everyday business, ritual design is used for apps. When you have apps that create dopamine loops, they're basically creating hidden ritual loops. But if you do it explicitly and consciously, you can design those meanings into it without it being a hidden thing. Like, for example, the Apple unboxing is designed as a ritual. But you can do that as a designer consciously and call yourself a ritual designer. Very few ritual designers out there. You can design things like games. This is the game sheet we used with ritual design tools, a relationship game. This is the back end of an app to help couples connect better. And have flow in their relationship, what we call pillow talk moments. So ritual design is an untapped field. Any designer right now, there's like armies of UX designers, very few human scientists or human trained designers. Most of them are UX designers who've done an introduction on design thinking and who've got a vague idea that it's good to do click testing. But I'm being a bit harsh here, but they need a bit more science around how to design intelligent, conscious and ethical design that goes as far as ritual thinking. And that's another field which, if you're into design and human science, enjoy. There's a lot to do. And right now we're actually working on that particular front with Green Elephant. We've productized a little ritual called Micro Habits, inspired by James Clear's Atomic Habits. We basically design micro habits to help leaders shift behaviors in any work situation. So I can show you more about that if you're interested. element to 103. So that's another bubble. Now 5, Ubisoft. How many people are gamers? Done a lot of work in gaming. We worked with Supercell, Ubisoft, some smaller Finnish startups like Sound Games that Rebekah knows. We are really interested in the gaming industry in not just flow, which we talked about earlier, which is, by the way, something that you can use to do game strategy design, human science. Like I was called in by the Ubisoft CMK, which is at the time it was the Customer Market Knowledge Intelligence Unit. So they're the ones looking at all the latest science. They had some really smart scientists in there, like really great data analysts, but they were hiring subcontractors like me to go in and just help them on a specific. So I was training them on ethnography and empathy. So I was giving them toolkits that we had from IDEO on how to go out into the field and talk to people in an empathically relevant way. So this is me going there with one of their team. I was training their team by doing it. So I was not doing ethnography for them. I was doing it with their team, teaching them how to be autonomous in doing design ethnography. So here this is in England. I'm doing some deep ethnography on Just Dance, one of the games that was family games, but we also did that for Assassin's Creed, Splinter Cell, some of the new franchises that have been out, like, Assassin's Valhalla has been evolving and so on. But this is actually a family game. And the challenge with family is that you go and talk to a child, they're not going to be able to tell you much. So you have to use interesting human science tools like personal construct theory, and all sorts of other ways of mapping constructs with fun and games and cards and tangible toys to be able to get them to open up and give you something relevant for the design team. So this is another whole field. Like, gaming industry is overtaken 4 years ago, the whole entertainment industry, movie theater. So gaming is massive and it's growing and it will continue to grow, most people say. So working in gaming, a lot of people are competing to be a game designer, but very few people know of the importance of human science in game design. Huge untapped potential in there. Again, have fun, go and check out how you can, the basic premise that we learned from the game design is that what people say is absolutely disconnected from what they do. So if you want to understand reality, it's not enough to go in, do you like my design? Like a lot of UX designers, they go and they do a test and they say, hello, this is my design, do you like it? And of course, the person's got, I want to make them feel good, so I'm going to say yes. Not very useful. But what you do is you use techniques to go and see what they do, which could be like absolutely at odds with what they say, what they think, and what they feel. When you map those 4, you get this, which is why I put it as a square. The do, think, say, feel is classic in ethnography. So this element of aligning what you do, think, say, and feel is an entire mental model that some people have monetized. And like, there's experts out there that's the mental model they sell, and they do the whole career of coaching and consulting on this. Technically, it's called human factors engineering, or in Europe, design anthropology. Depending on which part of the side of the Atlantic you're on, you'll call it differently. So that's another field. Human factors engineering's in gaming, for example. So feedback. When you say feedback to people, they often think, I'm going to a restaurant and I'm going to complain about the food's quality was not good enough. People have this massive confusion. There's a myth that complaining and feedback is the same thing. One of the biggest triggers for conflict in organizations, and I'll tell you a bit more about conflicts in a second, is that most of the time, with the best intention in the world, like, for example, I saw a company that had a sticker on the wall that says, we love feedback, because they read the books, right? They saw that humans need feedback, and they destroyed their culture in 6 months. People were leaving. On our team, we have a therapist. Our therapist was fully booked. They were having burnouts, people walking away crying, just because they had a sticker on the wall that says, we love feedback. It was a license. So you'd have people coming up to each other and going like, oh, I'm going to give you feedback. And boom, there you go. They open up they sort of, and they complain. They don't really give useful feedback. So at the time I was working as a consultant with them, but actually I was also on the ground doing coaching with these people. And then we started to map what's the difference between green, blue, and red feedback. When you look at the periodic table, that makes sense. Green is the sort of praise and the needed, just where am I in the process, reassurance. Blue is opinion, only useful if you're an expert, and red is the advice that everybody gives without thinking. And if you measure, everybody's giving blue and red, which is opinions and advice, and hardly anybody's giving reassurance feedback loops. which means that people start to think of feedback as a dangerous, difficult, psychologically unsafe thing to receive, which is true. So I then made them a video and a little infographic, which is called the 10 tips to psychologically safely give and receive feedback. Number one to take away from this is don't give feedback, ask for feedback, which means that when you ask, you're ready to receive, you're psychologically safe. That's the sort of like baseline. Don't go out and give unless you consent. It's like anything. There's a huge topic of consent to do with sexuality today. The same applies with feedback. Unconsensual feedback is extremely damaging to human psychology, and people don't realize that. So you could go like, okay, I have some feedback for you. Would you be willing to receive it? And when would be the best time for you to receive it so that it is most valuable for you? That is very rare. People don't do that. They just go straight in. I have feedback. Do you want to hear it? Oh, yeah, sure. I'm going like, shit, no, I don't want feedback. I can't take this right now. So coaching wise, we do this a lot online. This is me coaching. This is a famous artist called Katrina Heikkila, who does really incredible art with sort of very engaged art. And I was coaching her as a sort of on stage on a Zoom, actually filmed so that it could be posted out in YouTube to show the process. So this is a coaching process where the whole idea of taking conscious feedback is taken to another level. So coaching is done incredibly badly today. That's why coaching has got a bad press, because so many people are giving bad feedback. Like I've seen coaches in startup world who go in and their main ethos is to make the startups cry. You have grown men and women going on stage to pitch to investors who are breaking down in tears because the coach believes that the best way to give them feedback is to make them cry before going on stage. It's totally insane. And so, there's a huge opportunity area to become human science-based coaches. A lot of coaches are just experts who have a lot to say and who just want to give their advice. Great coaching is being able to empathize with the person's need and help them by mirroring what they can grow on and just feed them a little bit of insights that they can receive and take when the time and the feedback is receivable for them. And there's a lack of those kind of people out there. Again, human science has a lot to bring to the world of coaching, whether it's startup coach pitching, esports. We talked about gaming. There's a lot of coaching need for esports. And of course, leadership coaching. Leaders are struggling. They don't have the science. They need coaches. So the element from this relevant about coaching and so on is conscious feedback for 102. Now, we talked about conflicts. We can't really talk about communication without talking about conflicts. So like as a teenager, I was a bit of a rebel, not in the sense that I would go and fight, but in the sense that I would be the rebellious mediator. I always wanted to be the one solving the conflict. And so I've been undercover. I've done undercover mediation work. I've done undercover hostile situations. In France, there's a lot of hostility in the business world, including. And this is me doing a conflict mediation in a company in Finland called YIT, a building company with a subcontractor that I was working for. And this is a mediation that took 4.5 hours with about 15 people you can see behind in the room. The flip chart's on the right. This is me filming it as part of the communication strategy to get them to behave. Because you'll find that people behave very differently when they know they're being filmed. They don't become assholes. They watch their tongue. Sorry, again, I keep swearing, that's a bad habit, but they are actually very often different. So I started my mediation, I used basically non-violent communication, which is, some of you know the whole field of NVC, but if you take NVC with green, blue, red, this is the simplified model of basically how you walk through a mediation, which takes time, takes preparation, and it takes science. The emotions will run high, people will start getting upset. Taking them down the funnel towards negotiation is an art form that requires the science of understanding how the brain goes from feelings, and then you take them back up to facts to then go to the feelings as flags for their unfulfilled needs that only then can unlock negotiation. That's like mediation 101. That works in track 2 diplomacy. If you've watched Oslo, the movie in Netflix that talks about how diplomats can do sort of that type of thing in negotiation that's non-official behind the scenes, it also works in track 2 negotiation. So you can use, I mean, if you're interested in conflicts, there's a massive opportunity area about conflict mediation, and it's growing. As you can see in the press, there's always conflicts going on, and it's not just a new thing. So being a conflict mediator opens up military jobs, diplomatic jobs. It opens up local jobs. It opens up corporate negotiators. Chris Voss, good name to look up. her ex-FBI, a lot of techniques that he's been working on, I've put into the periodic table. He talks about tactical empathy, hostage negotiation on the phone, helplines with people, suicide helplines. Anywhere there's a conflict, internal, external, they need scientists to help them, not just people who are cowboys going in, going like, oh, it's all right, calm down, guys. It doesn't work. You need to use a bit of psychology to help people in conflicts. And so the element functional conflicts is a topic that I'm constantly asked for. I'm doing on average 2 conflict boot camps a year, where we take, 30 people and we train them as conflict mediator basics. We help them to transform conflicts rather than just, thank you, Chris. It's Chris Voss, actually, not Chris Voss.
Oh, hang on, Voss.
With Voss, VOSS, yeah.
Well, that was...
yeah. And so...
Sorry.
That's right. So Chris Voss is interesting for that. He's got a lot of interesting case studies on pretty hostile situations. So again, conflict mediation, if anybody is interested in that field, it's not a very known one. You're in a country that prides itself on being one of the most diplomatically recognized. Martti Ahtisaari Foundation is still there. Finnish diplomats have a reputation. You have legitimacy from coming from Vaasa to be working in that field more than any other country, probably. So, okay, next field, meetings that go well. We all crave those meetings where people are laughing and smiling. It's not death by PowerPoint. But there's a problem. It's the chaos. Like you might have seen this, but like I've been in meetings where people are having a great laugh and the chaos takes over. And then you have chaos on the walls, chaos in post-its, chaos in notes, chaos in time management. So I started using the theory called chaotic balance, which some of you might have heard of if you've read up D. Hock. D. Hock is a name that's very unknown. He's a business guy who created one of the biggest successful companies. And The Birth of the Chaotic Age is his signature book. Basically, he explains that there's a science behind balancing chaos and order in social dynamics, which most people don't realize. And it comes down from locking down the process. That includes the way you color code, the roles you use, the time buckets you use in a meeting, the agenda, and so on like that. And so this is me testing chaotic post-it color coding to solve this particular problem and make collective intelligent color coding. So most people, when you ask them to color code post-its, they color code on content, which means that marketing is blue, engineering is red, and so on and so on. It's just content of the conversation. If you flip the dynamics and think, what is the process maturity of the information being shared? Blue is individual knowledge, first level maturity. Green is collective intelligence. Orange is ideas that are not yet agreed, and red are agreed decisions. It's like a maturity of ideas. It doesn't matter if you're talking engineering or marketing. They are color-coded on the basis of process maturity, collective intelligent color coding. These are actual post-its I printed on recycled paper just as a test. I usually sell those in companies when they do a lot of like innovation, like lean startup kind of setup. They use these post-its a lot. But essentially, just that color coding. If you work with Miro boards, or if you work, with digital whiteboards, it's actually just take the color code and use it as it is on a digital post-it board. It creates less chaos and it helps you design algorithms. So people think of a meeting as usually a list of topics to go through, which is, pardon my English, really unhelpful. I was going to say something worse. If you look at an agenda is generally a list of topics. And what can you expect from that? Chaos. Because each topic is going to be discussed differently. The personalities of the people are going to take it to different directions, and you're going to waste time. So what people don't realize is that the best way to actually make an organization thrive is to have an algorithm or a social protocol that are time bucketed steps with actual rules and a host that takes people through those steps. If you've ever done proper workshops, creative workshops, like I used to work in IDEO, we did 3-day workshops. They were designed like a choreography. And the more they're designed, the less they're visible. So the client would walk in and think, it was so beautifully chaotic and lovely and so inspiring. And it felt like it was so structured, but I didn't feel any structure. Yeah, it's because we spent 4 weeks trying to build it. And that's algorithms. If you want to see examples of algorithms that made a lot of money, you have the 5-day sprint, okay, by NAP. He's coined one algorithm that works for design sprints of 1 week with a specific thing on each day. Design thinking is a set of algorithms. Lean works with algorithms. But you don't really need any of those. You can make your own up. You can design your own algorithms, and it's a social science job because it requires you to think of the psychology of what's going to happen in each step. A brainstorm doesn't have the same rules as a PowerPoint slide or a discussion. And if you just run them in the same way, expect chaos. So that's basically a job field in itself, is algorithm design. And I noticed that Miro, which is one of the whiteboard providers, has actually now got a almost like qualification for you to use existing templates of algorithms and host them, which I would call harvest and host. They actually start like making a whole field of things for experts in that. Been interesting to see how that job is going to evolve with more and more remote meetings. So algorithms, the element algorithm canvas is like, how do you build structured processes for people to work together in collective intelligence? There's another whole playground there. It's 11 o'clock. I'm on number 9. This might be a bit too slow. Let's see if I cut some out. Art of hosting. How many people know the art of hosting? It's based in Finland, partly. Okay, so if you haven't heard of art of hosting, Google them. Art of hosting. They're basically professional facilitator / hosts. They prefer the word host because it's different than facilitation. It's focused on process, not on the facilitation, which usually includes also content facilitation. So a host is like a dinner party. You don't go to a dinner party and tell people what to talk about. You say like, Rebekah, you're going to go there and talk politics for 20 minutes. It doesn't work. You just go, Rebekah, here are the toilets, here's the food, here are the drinks, go off and enjoy. That's hosting. In process design, it's the same. You need hosts, not facilitators generally. And they use some pretty simple techniques like circular check-ins to make sure that people all feel that they're on an equal basis. They use marketplaces. This is a fantastic tool. Basically you create your whole agenda. This is Alto Design Factory. I did a project for Alto Global Impact. They asked us to do a workshop to kick off interesting global projects with people from any field, including academia and government, business as well, from all around the world. There was 120 people, and they said, come on, can you do your magic with a workshop? I said, like, we're not going to run this as a traditional workshop. We're going to use an OST, an open space technology marketplace logic. So we basically didn't have an agenda. This is them creating their agenda live. And most people, when you explain that to them, they panic. They think it's going to be utter chaos, and it works like a charm. I had a facilitation team of 6 people, 5 of which were students, trained only the day before. And we ran a workshop of 120 people. 8 projects came out. 8 new ventures came out of this afternoon. And all it was is that we basically put their agenda on the wall and said, like, if you have a topic to propose, here are some spaces numbered. And it's like a marketplace logic where people can bid and come in. And it's a very interesting system. It's social engineering at its best. And you create little breakout groups and they're self-organizing, and it works like a charm. You use little devices like Native American thumb voting, which is not like democracy. Yes, I have a question. I have a counter proposal, no veto. Little tricks like that literally blow up the whole dynamics because people are so used to voting down and saying, no, I don't want. This just creates a fluidity in decision making. So lots of nice little tips and tools come from the hosting world. You'll see Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, even TV hosts. Like I've met a few TV hosts who use those same techniques. So hosting is a job. One of the elements that's really relevant in the periodic table about that is how to make agreements on a verbal level. What is the art of agreeing across culture? Because it's one thing to agree like the Swedes in a sort of discussion, or the French by shouting and arguing, but how do you do it across boundaries of culture? There's an art to that as well. That's science. So again, interesting with hosting. If you're into good for the world projects like Mundo Level, this was Andy Clutterbuck. We were working with UNICEF. This was a beautiful project where we were working on global change through the UN. Nigeria, Kosovo, Pakistan, but mostly Uganda as a pilot on a 5-year line. And you can see now examples of that project that came, but it was really working with sanitation in schools. And the thing that Andy was doing is he was like the project manager, but what I would call a steward, which is looking beyond the short term of a meeting or particular project, but longer term, building community and longitudinal timelines. And they need tools like value rules. So, you start usually from a set of rules that people have in a PowerPoint slide that nobody's read, like, oh, we believe in empowerment and empathy. Okay, how do you do that? I don't know, but I like it, So we basically go in and we take, okay, well, what do you make a value tangible with is a behavior, so that it's measurable. So every single value becomes a behavior. So we were starting looking at what are the rules of behavior that can be tagged along to a value. So like, for example, creativity, if you say that you're valuing creativity, the rule could be yes and, no yes but. You've probably heard that one before. And it's really easy to introduce as a host. But without that, everybody's idea of creativity is going to be different. So it's like creates a sort of actionable leadership stewardship tool. So if you're interested in like that bigger picture, working as a steward, it's a fancy way of saying becoming a leader. Like leaders today are needing to be stewards more than managers. And the stewards need those kind of human science tools like value rules, thinking of the psychology of their teams, contextual intelligence, emotional intelligence are super important today. And they don't know where to even start looking for those. So they go off and do masters on that and get a few tools. So again, if you have those in your pocket, beautiful. The big takeaway from that was chaotic roles. The word steward comes from 4 chaotic roles, which are universal roles that help any team in any company: participant, harvester, host, and steward. You'll hear me using those words a lot. If you're interested in that, there's a whole element in the periodic table about chaotic roles. So again, like that to an HR manager is gold. Yesterday, I sent out to an HR manager a cheat sheet of how you build chaotic roles to build a structure of reward system for your employees. Saves them 3 months of work and consulting work. You could go and charge for that. So 11, here we go. We are in Dubai now. I was trying to find a nice like seasonal picture to make you dream of Dubai. I did actually a lecture a few years ago in Helsinki about the similarities between Dubai and Helsinki just at this time when people are getting seasonal depression. There's a lot of cultural similarities actually with Dubai that are hidden similarities due to extreme climate. Anyway, I went for the government. I was working with IDEO. This was the most exciting project I've ever done. The brief was very small. Please redesign the government in 6 months. Or in business talk, reframe the role of the business registration licensing from simply managing the demands of new business to becoming a dynamic service organization. Wow. So you go there and so we have a team. So we have a space designer, as in basically an architect, a people designer, me, whatever that means, communication designers, digital experience designers. Notice the link with the VME. And so we had a team of like, we put together a team in 48 hours because we had to fly out there. It was like literally off. And we went in and it was literally absolutely open sky. There were at the point of the project, there was only 3 governments in the world that were absolutely innovative: Singapore, Iceland, and Dubai. And we were in Dubai giving open hands. We just had a timeline. We said, like, whatever the budget you need, just tell us, but we're going to basically make sure that this government is reinvented. So, wow. So you go in and this is like what happened. And this was the space we designed. Lots more to tell about this, but this is a little snapshot of what it was like mocked up to be. But the short story is that there's a job called organizational designer, which was the one that I got most excited about in university. That's what I wanted to do. And I did 1 or 2 projects on that, but could do more of those. Organization design focuses on organizational structures like teal organizations, hierarchies. How do you build team dynamics across cultures? There's a whole field in that. Organizational designer, innovative consultancies hire you there. But also you can be a freelance. So, and there you need to master chaotic balance. This whole idea of chaos and order needs to be your sort of bread and butter mental model, just like some wouldn't have flow. So a lot of things that you can do, we've still got a few more to go. You recognize this ad probably. Oatly, beautiful copywriting. I analyzed this copy because it's a great example of green empathic copy, focusing on the other person. So the other person being the reader of the ad. We could have paid an Instagram celebrity to post this on their super hot feed, but instead we made this poster. At least we know how to make oat drinks, laughing at itself. Beautiful example of humor, works in Finnish culture, Swedish culture. This kind of copy doesn't just come out of a brilliant mind. It comes out of a team of people working together with copywriters, art directors, and human scientists. This was the team, I was up there, the team of people we had working on user-centered marketing and advertising. And what we then had is we were basically going out into the field, and I was there going to interview people with and anthropology tools, and understanding what's going on in the person's mind about the brand. This was F-Secure, and understanding that the blockages that people have in their mind psychologically, and turning that into a brief for a copy. So, for example, here, people didn't understand the risk of internet security. So we just sort of, how do you make the risk tangible in a playful way, without fear mongering, without going into the, you're about to lose all your data kind of thing. So we had this guy walking around Berlin, a lot of fun shooting this, and he was just wearing this placard going, "This is my credit card number, go ahead, enjoy." And filming the reactions of the people taking the credit card and just going off and buying stuff with it. And of course, this was all like just fake, but huge amounts of like viral videos came from that, because it was just funny and tangible. But that came from science. It didn't come from the copywriter's brilliant mind only. And so there, the ethos we had in the agency was building lasting customer relationships. So we would look at the whole customer journey, not just the purchase, which is what most marketing is doing. And we would help build a coherent communication across them. And that you need metacognitive communication to do. And this is the tool I used with the agencies that, the business canvas. This is a canvas that we built for marketing, not actually marketing, but across the journey metacognitive communication canvas, which you'll recognize the green, blue, red if you've seen the TEDx. So this was the tool that I'd taken to a workshop, and I'd go, okay, F-Secure, senior management, post-it wall with this, boom, let's nail your brand positioning with this. And so that's a concrete tool that is a direct output of metacognitive communication that helps you do copywriting, scripts, ads, SEO writing, ghostwriting, writing books behind the scenes, and any other form of writing for that matter that needs some science behind. So plenty to think about, and that's about tangibility. The tangibility barrier is something that's in science, as Rebekah can attest. There's a lot of people who would benefit from learning about how to cross the tangibility barrier to communicate their science, their beautiful findings. 7108. This is actually my brother Jonas. He's a therapist. He's working with this. This is Anu and Jonas here are sort of debriefing a presencing session. So what they're doing here is that they are dealing with a crisis. We get called with crisis quite often, because when we coach people and train people, when they have a real problem, they call me and go like, oh. And so we have a sort of offering which is called presencing, which is actually not from us. Presencing is something that has been invented or coined by Otto Scharmer in the Presencing Institute in MIT. It's a huge field, again, the whole presencing. But if you sort of look at presencing, it really literally means just holding space for another person without trying to fix their problems, but giving them a chance to open their thinking and think out loud, and doing it in an empathic and present way as opposed to absencing. So one of his main messages in the MIT is that there's a huge problem with absencing, which is made worse by internet. Like, for example, you're on a Zoom. I bet that half of you are multitasking and absent. It doesn't matter. I don't mind. But that is a phenomenon that as a society scales up to make massive problems with leadership. Because if you're a leader and your team is presenting to you a key thing, and that they spent 3 weeks working on it, and suddenly you're there half-assed listening to what they're saying without the presence of mind, you're wasting their time, your time, and the company's time. But that, if you go further down the line and it becomes more than waste, it becomes conflictual and crisis. The only way to solve a crisis and do conflict mediation is to start by presencing all the parties. So if I get a conflict mediation, for example, in this case, they had a tricky situation with a manager who was in conflict with a client. And so basically they both went off and presenced the two different parties in parallel, debriefed on the notepads, what are the key learnings, and prepared a mediation together. And this is Otto Scharmer's like complex picture of what actually the art of presencing entails. It's more than just listening. Active listening. Okay, there's a whole art form there. And crisis relief is a field that needs you. Therapists are overwhelmed, frontliners in crisis situations, helpline operators, company psychologists. Check out Antti.com in Finland, who does online therapy for companies with the whole post-COVID anxiety. There's lots of work right there. Learning how to use empathic communication and hold in space. You can get paid to listen to people a lot and without even being necessarily a therapist. So presencing, element presencing 5105 is also really relevant for you. If you want to get working. Now, something a bit lighter. This was number 14. This is Pia. I had lunch with her this week, actually. This is the beginning of her YouTube channel, Pia's Little Customs. This is now her channel. I think she's got 140 subscribers or something. No, 123,000 subscribers. She's a Finnish YouTuber. I started working with her before she was even on YouTube, when she was basically an intern working with me on an ethnography project in Helsinki. And at the time, she was just like looking at the world as an ethnographer. So she was not really like a YouTuber, entertainer, influencer. She was just an ethnographer wanting to understand the world and solve problems. And then we basically had a lot of sparring. And one of the things that she was really passionate about is making customs, these little customs. And so she used her empathic training in anthropology to build a YouTube channel, 124,000 subscribers. She's now making a decent living, and she's now turned into a producer, and she's training up to be scriptwriter and working with television. That's her today. And we had a lot of fun with the filming, but what she was doing as an influencer is playing with ego roles. And the word ego is a dirty word in Finland. People think, oh, ego's bad. Americans have big egos. We don't have an ego problem. Actually, ego is a global problem. And it's a problem only because people get stuck in it. But an ego is not negative. It's the way we relate and drive the ego, like a car. It's not the car the problem, it's the driver. So how we drive our ego, social media influencers, for example, have to tackle that question. You can't be a social media influencer if you despise ego. You have to learn how to dance with your ego and not take it too seriously. And that whole ego distanciation is a massive field in our periodic table, for which we've created several roles, which are like ego hats. And it's super important if you're going to do any form of influence, whether it's talking in public, stand-up comedy, what we call sustainable stand-up, where you laugh at yourself, not others, YouTube, whatever, social media, community management. There's the ego that pops up, and it has to be tackled. Otherwise, social media is just a pain. So ego hats, the element, 7109. And storytelling. Pia is actually at the moment studying storytelling, and we were having this lunch conversation, which she said, like, do you realize that literally all of society is changing through the collective narrative? Like, history is a collective narrative. The way we think of the world and the crisis is a narrative. Like, the objective reality is seldom shared. It's really just the story spin of it. Try looking at news from Reuters instead of Yle, and you'll see the gap. It's very interesting to see that storytelling is the foundation of what a lot of people think of reality. So you can change a lot of the world by just becoming a great storyteller. 2 more to go. Almost there. 2 short ones. And then we go into something a bit more interactive, and you can ask some questions. This is family. So work is not just work. Family is a job. You can be a household parent, and it's a full-time job. You'll have a massive education responsibility of educating your children to become future global citizens or whatever you want. Parenting is a place where metacognitive communication has a huge place. This is me in a restaurant, having a good laugh on a birthday with my children and my brother, and they basically had booked a surprise cooking class where, as a family, we were cooking for all our 50 guests, and I had no idea. I just turned up, and there was a restaurant chef ready to help us cook together. Now, like a team building you would do, but with family. Now, this is just like a good, happy time in the family as an example snapshot of when you're working with family, you also have a lot of issues. Educating, you might have, for example, in our family, we have some people with ADHD. Then you have to learn about how ADHD affects communication styles and not go into sort of knee-jerk reactions about judging why a person is not looking at you in the eye and thinking they're not interested. So you have to learn about body language, and parenting brings a lot of wisdom around not just sort of the parenting itself, but drama triangles. So as a parent, if you really engage in parenting, you'll learn periodic table element 7102, which is about the Cartman triangle of victim, savior, and aggressor, and have to learn to separate from it. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So parenting, but also social work. I have a few friends who are working as social workers, and it's very similar type of science that you need for them both, is learning how to step away from the drama and evolve through the challenges of drama, the drama triangle. And now the last 16th little snapshot for you. Hopefully by now you're getting inspired about all that you can do with conscious communication. This is a funny little snapshot of a training. This was one of the most awkward moments of the training, where we were getting people blindfolded to interact, to teach them about body language and things like that. And this was a Jedi training that was like a 3-month learning journey, which each one was a focus on different things. These were the good old days before COVID, when we were allowed to be face to face. And the point I'm making here is pedagogical design needs science. I was hired by a number of places as a pedagogical designer because of the human science. So for example, designing teacher training programs, or making pedagogical evaluations of companies doing startup work on educational technology, or simply teaching better than average, because when you understand the psychology of learning retention, you can actually do a better job teaching, because you can sort of engage in different levels in your pedagogical design. So all of that can be done with conscious communication. Now, I'd like to invite you, those of you who are still here, and even if you're on the replay of this, this is now going to be a little exercise in empathy. I'd like you to just look at these people a second and just notice what's going on inside you as you see them. Some of them will trigger something positive, something negative, something neutral. There might be curiosity about the person. There's a lot of people just flashing by. Humanity is not just the people in your bubble. Humanity is not just your mates around you in university, your family, or your hobbies. Humanity is this. And if we want to be inclusive, it does require us to understand communication on a global level. That's not just how I like to communicate in my cultural preference. We have to come to the 21st century where we cannot focus only on what is best because of a cultural preference. Like, for example, in Finland, we like to be respectful, humble, and fair. That's a value-based cultural difference. Doesn't have to apply everywhere. It doesn't mean that that's the only and best way to connect with humans. There's other ways of connecting that are also beautiful, which might not feel as fair, that are based on equity, not equality. And all of those different, very deep ethical questions around communication are left aside because they're too difficult, too nebulous. So people revert to, okay, I'm French, I'm going to teach my French way. I'm Finnish, I'm a sort of respectful person, so I'm going to teach all the world to be respectful. You see this in educational technology. People go out and they say, Finnish education is the best in the world, I'm going to scale this in India. And it doesn't work because they have a different culture. So, you know, what can metacognitive communication do? I think the first big question is this, which is a very interesting question. Because you can ask it depending on how I say it to you. If I type this in a text message, your inner voice is going to give it a tone of voice. Like if I write this in a text message to a group chat, you could watch what happens. You could have people who go like, in their head, they're hearing, who do you think you are? You know, and it's like aggression. And then somebody might in their head read it out as being like, who do you think you are? Or somebody else might think, who do you think you are? Now, this is a philosophical question, but the answer to that question really is going to determine how you communicate with the world. Because when you start looking in the mirror, you know, you look in, you know, the famous metaphor. I wish I had a video that did this. Like you zoom into the eye and you see the whole universe unfolding, right? The whole metaphor, you've seen this before, I'm sure. The answers of who do you think you are generally can come in these categories. If you're French, you'll think your thoughts. You know, the French philosophical background is like, I think, therefore I am, Descartes. So therefore, when you think something, you think it's true, and you think you are that thought. It creates ego at the level of thought. Some people think they're their feelings. Very highly empathic people think they're their feelings. So when they feel bad, they feel that they're a bad person. Others think they're their beliefs. You know, I'm define myself based on my beliefs. I believe that the world should be a better, more fair place. So therefore, I am a fair person. Or they think that they're their values. You know, I'm a respectful, a humble Finn. Therefore, that's who I am. Or they think that they're their ego. I'm a social media influencer with 170,000 followers. That's who I am because that's my identity socially. Or I am this body. Look at me on Instagram. Look at my muscles. Or I am my gut, even. I'm just putting there as like a teaser for you. It's like now the whole microbiota topic is coming out. So you could say like, I am a million or millions and millions of bacteria. I am bacteria. You know, you could play with this if you take it less seriously. But the question, who do you think you are, is a really powerful question that as a human scientist, I invite you to never stop asking yourself and other people. Because the answer to that question is going to give you really their reality, and therefore their not just their personal reality, but also their personality. And personality can be changed by thinking of that question differently. Try changing culture and you'll change your personality. So where I'm going with this is that metacognition or metacognitive communication is this sort of possibility of looking at communication from a step back, just like metacognition is about thinking about thinking. Metacognitive communication is when you look at how you communicate, including in your head, from a distance, which opens up the fundamental opening to all human empathy, which is self-empathy, or what the Greeks would call self-compassion, or philautia, which is an element in the periodic table as well. The Greeks used to say, before you can love anybody, you need to start from yourself, and that's called self-compassion. Know thyself, be philautic. Self-empathy. So if you're going out to be empathic with a person, you know, no matter who they are, that's the real challenge, is the degree to which you dislike one of those people is the degree to which you dislike that part of you. So the training I used to do with students in Alto, when we were doing ethnography training, is I would take them into people's homes, and the challenge would be go and fall in love with that person for 2 hours. It doesn't matter what you write down. Your job is to see the beauty in that person and make them feel seen. And you'll get beautiful insights. You'll get really powerful design activatable insights. But if you go in there with a notepad as a judge, as an interrogator, with a judgment of they're different to me, I don't like them because of this, that, and the other, they're different because of this, that, and the other, you're not going to get very much out of it. Real deep empathy is being able to step into their shoes and go, forget me a second, forget my values. They have a good reason to be like that. And there's some degree of beauty in there that you're perhaps going to see, usually in people's eyes. That's the most universal. So metacognition opens the possibility of self-empathy, which is the gateway for you to start taking it to Jedi level in terms of any field of application. Literally, that is why it's so challenging for us right now, is that it's permissive in every field of life, whether you're working in business, government, academia, everywhere you go, communication is often the bottleneck of human-to-human interaction. And empathy is the lacking thing. If you start measuring what are the parameters that make it problematic, is empathy. And that in turn is lack of self-empathy. People are so busy criticizing themselves. How on earth can they have empathy to others? So this goes quite deep. This is an invitation for personal growth towards self-kindness, of course. But, you know, on a more scientific level, it opens up, like, once you have checked that box of self-empathy, then what? Then what? Then it means that you can help others to better connect, either with each other or within their heads. And the playground is immense. So what we're doing right now is that we're upgrading this periodic table. It's like think of it as like buckets that are growing over time. And because it's such a vast undertaking, I created a celestial calendar, which is basically indexed on the rhythm of the planet. And every planet season is a lens. And so we fill and upgrade the table. So at the moment, we're in October, we're focusing on chaotic and attitude. And then we move on. So it allows us to sort of, as a team, not get lost in the periodic table's complexity, but break it down into seasonal campaigns, seasonal research, seasonal work on that topic. And then we're able to go through, you know, each of these different lenses in a systematic way. And, you know, one of the things I would love to see in the future is actually more work with, that's my real motivation for being here with you, is to find more help to build further this amount of knowledge that is still at the very beginning. Like, I think we're only at the very, very infancy of understanding the complexity of humanity. We know more about space and technology than about human mind. And I think there's a big job to be done there. So this periodic table is just like a platform to help other people go off and do good good research, better jobs, and more aligned and coordinated work on the topics of human to human and human to self connection. Now, this is me stopping so that you can rest your brain, ask some questions. Maybe Rebekah can give some reflections or questions of her own. And then we can enter into an AMA, meaning ask me anything about the periodic table, about the elements. I'm here. I'm at your disposal until the end of this slot. Use me, don't abuse me, and everything will go well.
Wow. Okay, I'm giving you a virtual clap. This is fantastic. Of course, we should just choose the icons from below, but hey, yeah, I'd like to open the floor up to the students as well, because so many thoughts have come to my mind, but I don't want to hog this experience from you. Is anyone kind of excited about asking something? Even write in the chat. Hang on. Yeah.
Sanna is saying, all I can say is just, wow, what a range of information. It's a
Yeah.
bit overwhelming. I get headaches from looking at this.
No.
Yeah. You're the only people I present this in this way to, because I know you're kind of experts in the field, but most start in business. I just show this as a flash and then I move on to some very detailed practicals because they're like, oh. So yeah, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah, I have to actually say, I mean, honestly, there were so many wow moments as you were going through this for me. And probably one of the biggest wows started at your ritual design and ritual designer. Because if we look back through the weeks, even of this course, we were actually looking at the evolution of, human cognition and technology. And of course, they went side by side. And what was the greatest turn in human cognition as well as technological innovation? It was the ritual. Wow, that you've actually got that in there. And so probably, I mean, you have already started explaining what ritual design is and, what is the ritual designer? You have that beautiful illustration. What do you do as a ritual designer when you're entering a situation? I mean, just to begin with.
I'm going to step back because
yes,
I had a slide that I took out because when I put all my slides and then I just cut them in half because there was way too much. One of the slides I took out was actually the history, the evolution of design with the ritual design in it, so I should have left it. But anyway,
sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. Zoom back 1943. Okay, so ritual design obviously started way back. Like it's hugely ancient, but modern design took a turning point. Usually in the wars. Usually wars bring a lot of innovation. People often think of wars terrible, but there's a good side of war, which is it speeds up innovation because. I studied in Loughborough University, human factors engineering, and the university was born during the war because of a wartime need of redesigning airplane cockpits. So basically, in World War II, you had the Messerschmitts, you had the Spitfires, you had the Hurricane, huge 800 horsepower planes, which were like massive pieces of engineering prowess, really. I mean, the German engineers and the British American engineers were all very, very good. They made these incredible planes that they could build in weeks. Their problem was not the plane, their problem was the pilot. They couldn't train pilots fast enough. And the problem was not clear why. They could build planes faster than pilots. They were getting these like farm boys that had not any education and put them behind the full of testosterone going like flying these big planes and then being shot down 2 weeks later, they're dead. Like, how do I get a new pilot? I'm being really pragmatic here. Allied High Commandment issued a secret study from Loughborough University and other places, and they had cognitive psychologists on the team. And their brief was to understand how to make the training faster. And they came up with a big insight, which is the foundation of what we're doing now with human-centered design. That was the turning point, is that they realized that at that point, engineers were making machines for people who were adaptable. And a human is by nature adaptable. And so what they were doing is that the engineer makes the pilot, if they need a dashboard, they put a dashboard. And then the humans were adapting to that dashboard. And they realized that if they started to think of adapting the dashboard to the human, suddenly it was easier to use. Surprise, surprise. And that paradigm shift literally created a revolution that was seeded the huge amount of design change throughout the next decades. But the essential shift, if you take the story from the aeroplane, is that at first, all the cognitive load was on one sense. As you know, we have 11 senses. So they started looking at other senses like audition, That's how they introduced the first buzzers. So instead of having everything as flashing lights when they're already overloaded their visual cognitive, they start using sound so that they could spread the cognitive load on different senses. And then they started pushing that adaptation further. Then, they started taking later in the 90s, it was a USB stick with a voice of somebody you love who actually is in the autopilot voicing, because there's an emotional connection that's speed reaction time. So military has always been the forefront of human factors. All my graduate friends were offered military jobs, including me. And there's a few of us who decided to work in the civilian, but all the money in human factors clearly still was and is today military. So that seeded a change that then went into nuclear power stations after the Bhopal catastrophe because of nuclear safety, and then in big industry, and then air traffic control, big railway stations, and gradually get into then the computer revolution with the sort of user interface of the 80s, the Apple and all that. Again, using the user's mental model of a desk to turn it into a visual desktop. Classic example of adapting the tool to the human, which you all know. When you take that logic to communication, how do you adapt communication to humans and not expect humans to adapt to insufficient communication problems? That's an interesting question today that goes towards brand design, service design, and ritual design. And therefore the ritual design is the advanced layer of thinking. If a ritual is so foundational, there's an element in the periodic table called meaning. Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, the unlocking of modern positive psychology is around the idea that the meaning you give to something is the biggest healing. So it doesn't actually matter if you've been in a concentration camp and had a terrible experience. The meaning you give to it, Mandela in prison, great example, is what actually makes your reality. And that's basically one of the schools of psychology. Logotherapy is a great way of healing war traumas, really advanced traumas. Take that with hypnotherapy, you can create a healing journey of a couple of weeks with people with deep trauma because you reprogram the meaning. Now that's on the therapy front. But in the design front, you can design services, products, and occurrences that create a meaning, that offer meaning for you, that is more positive and healing for you. So ritual design goes beyond the big rituals of church or religion or graduation. I'm talking about the everyday little rituals with a little r, not the big R's, which are brushing your teeth, checking your phone as you get out of bed. Those are rituals. Designing those rituals with a layer of meaning, the starting point, in answer to your question, Rebekah, is understanding, first of all, the ethical role of meaning. Because if I want to imagine, I give you the meaning that every time you check your phone, you're going to get addicted to my app, which is making me a lot of money. How ethical is that?
Exactly.
So ethics, I think, is the starting point of ritual design. Without ethics, ritual design becomes very, very dangerously manipulative. In fact, is what we see with gambling. Yeah.
My gosh.
On gambling. You talk to Ollie Rundgren about that. Sound games. So ritual design, the starting point for ritual design is understanding what is the meaning a person gives, and secondly, understanding that everybody generally thinks that meaning is outside. And you'll notice that the people who are happy are generally people who've understood that they are the authors of the meaning, that they don't outsource it to an external body of knowledge such as religion, government, social media, family, friends, life partner. Once you understand that the meaning is entirely up to you, you are the creator of the meaning, you have the power to hear whatever you want. And that, as a designer, is a massive responsibility. So understanding the power behind ritual design, I think, is a prerequisite to starting playing with the fire. The Fantasia's sorcerer experiment can very quickly go with this. That's why I'm not sort of actively pushing ritual design, is I don't think many designers are ethically educated enough to really go out and do good ritual design without it being dangerous. But if you do look at the ritual design, the starting point is studying the meaning, and therefore its semiotics and semantics are coming into the picture.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer to a very quick question. And I think, I mean, if no one else has any questions, please do speak now or forever hold your peace. But actually don't really, because that was my next question. How easy is it for the students to get into contact with you if they have any questions?
As easy as picking up the phone. I'm very reachable. I'm French by culture. I'm spontaneous, and I like people synchronous conversations more than chat. I like talking to Rebekah with audio messages on WhatsApp, because I know that in Finland people love this asynchronous, like, I want to check when it's my time, so you can also do me audio. I'm really easy to reach. We've been thinking of actually working a lot more with students, doing a hackathon around this periodic table and starting to fill it up. The assignment you have is actually an experiment towards that. Some of you might be interested in doing stuff with us in Green Elephant. We are a social enterprise, which means that we're not a profit-making company. We are a tea organization. We're very small. We lost half our team because of COVID. So at the moment, the reason we don't have interns is because we can't pay them. But I'm looking into value exchange methods for students to join nevertheless. And so we're toying with the idea at the moment of having a small team of interns who would be coming in on an exchange of service. In other words, we would coach them and train them in the art of something in the periodic table so that they have a hard skill on that, in exchange of them working with the periodic table for a period of time. That's just the thought that we're having. I'm still trying to figure out the ethical dimension, because a lot of people are saying you should always pay interns, and I agree. But the value could be done in different ways than just purely money. There could be all sorts of value exchanges. So I'm looking into that. But if you're interested in working and talking, or just having a chat, you know, I'm really easy to reach. All our social media contacts and our phone numbers are on our website, so we're not hiding anywhere.
Yeah. And I was actually going to say, in regards to value, you've also got to be thinking of long-term value, networked value as well. I mean, the experiences you can get from being involved in something like this can carry over the borders. It was fascinating. Thank you so much for also showing these embodied examples of, you know, what you can do with this knowledge, you know, and as communication experts. But I think we'd better round up for today, and thank you once again, round of applause, and we'll be in contact soon and see all the students next week again when you're stuck with me.
Joining. I'll stay here, Rebekah, to debrief this after this is finished. And to you all, if you actually do want to keep in touch, one easy way of doing it with very low, I'm just going to do my pitch for you a second, is that you can check out our YouTube video. We've got a lot of content there, but also we're streaming at the moment. Next up, we're streaming with a very interesting woman from Nigeria who's working, actually she's from Kenya, and she's working at the moment in Nairobi on startups. I'm doing basically a series of streams on conscious communicators. Rebekah's going to be in that as well at some point, if I can manage to convince her. So we've got like a channel on stream and YouTube to push this topic out into the world in a creative commons way. So if you are wanting to keep in touch, it doesn't have to be a phone call. It can also be this kind of thing. So voila from the sort of today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Thank you. Okay, and see you, students. See you next week.
Ciao, everybody.
Virtually,
thank you for joining.
Asynchronously. Bye.
Yes, see you, and thank you very much for a great lecture.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Nico, for the little...
Bye. Actually, I want to give you a video call.
Let's do that.
Because I want to show you something here in the same building that I'm in, and it connects with something that I would really like to connect you to. And we'll see you later, Helly. I'll just give you a call. I'll be back in a...
Just on the same Zoom or on...
No, I'll do it on the phone, on WhatsApp.